Like, I use like so much of my savings for this.
Kamara Hall, sashay away.
Oh,
Thank you so much for this
Kamora.
opportunity.
I'm so
Thank you all.
sorry. Wait, what's that? Shit!
She looks metallic. Metallic, metallic, metallic.
Though I can't quite recall overnight sensation.
Welcome to the Chop. Today we have some failed storylines, the danger of substance abuse, the most edited challenge in history, and some curious decisions about the top and bottom queens. We're going to take a closer look into that. And of course, the confessional chart and speculations. First of all, do you remember that interview to the former editor for Drag Race that we showed you last week? Well, if you didn't watch it, go watch it. There's a link in the description. I guarantee you it's absolutely worth it. But for our purposes today, I wanted to focus on the fact that she spoke of the queens in terms of base materials that you can use to build characters, dynamics, and storylines. Think about it as playing Minecraft. Of course, you cannot just copy and paste whatever you want, otherwise it's going to look like a mess. In order to do this job well, the keyword is character development. You have to be able to tell a story that is consistent with the characters and their motivations as you present them. And that is especially important right now, because in this episode we see that fundamental concept go completely out of the window. You have 13 queens, and you're filming them 10 to 15 hours a day for 1 month. So of course all that material has to be compressed in some way. This thing of building characters and storylines, in a way, it's something that you are forced to do when you are dealing with reality TV. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is with the fact that World of Wonder is not clear about this. They don't come forward and say to the viewers, listen, this is a dramatized show. Things might not be presented in chronological order. Don't use whatever you see on the show as a base to form an opinion on these queens, and then maybe go on Twitter and get crazy about it, because this is made for entertainment purposes. It's not made for you to create a reliable opinion on these queens. This is the only problem that I have. And with that said, let's begin our review. Do you remember episode 2? I know, it was 2 weeks ago. In television time, it's like 20 years ago. But do you remember the mole storyline? That kind of thing that came out of nowhere, and we got bombarded with confessionals with Tina and Candy being nasty to Elliot, and basically Elliot portrayed as a victim, you know? The poor queen who got eliminated without even having the possibility of showing who she was, and then she comes into this new group and these two people are bullying her. That was episode 2. Then we jump in to episode 1 and episode 3 with Tamisha. I have no problem with the characterization of Tamisha. In a word, she is lovable, and it comes through. They let her tell her story. We have episode 1, she shares the fact that she had cancer, and then we have episode 3, she talks about her biological family, her drag family, she talks about Tandy, she talks about her legacy. She shines through these 2 episodes. So what happens after you watched episode 1 and episode 3? Who is Tamisha? And you immediately think, oh my god, she is a legend. She is a positive character in the storytelling of the show. So what happens when you take someone and you oppose it to Tamisha? Storytelling 101. If you have a very positive character and you oppose it to someone, the other one, by sheer contrast, is going to look like a bitch. And this is exactly what happens. So in episode 2, she was a victim, and everything was so exaggerated, so over the top, so that she could look like she was a victim of 2 bullies. Then that edit went completely down the drain. Because immediately in the beginning of the episode, she starts complaining. She complains that Kimora and Denali were not going to vote each other off, that the whole thing was malicious, and then she proceeds to pick a fight with Tamisha. And we are shown all of that.
I was the last one in the room. Kimora already knew someone else, so she already was kind of like good up in the gig.
It was no malice behind it. It was gonna have to be one of us.
So why didn't you jump up?
Because they didn't vote me. They voted you.
She attacked the wrong one. All these chihuahuas beside me, you gonna go for the pit bull? No, ma'am.
I was gagging. I was gagging. Nevertheless, this is what they've shown us. From a storytelling point of view, why do you show me that? Because if you show me that, I'm going to think Elliot is a bitch. Is not a victim, is a bitch. So why go through the trouble of making him look like a victim in episode 2? I wonder if she will become a victim again in episode 5. Well, with this kind of storytelling, you never know. But this, I wouldn't call it a villain edit, but let's call it a villainizing edit for Elliot goes on throughout the whole episode.
Now I have a first impression of all y'all, so it is what it is.
Okay.
The first team is Denali, Elliot with 2 T's, Kimora Hall. You both voted for Elliot with 2 T's to go home. What made you decide on Elliot?
If 2 queens are having a conversation, on a second level, I now need to think who in the workroom should be hearing this or needs to be hearing this so that they can either comment on it or react to it later. So I need to get a reaction shot of this person so it looks like they're listening.
I get a very warm energy and she gives a very cold energy.
That's interesting.
Girl, we're not gonna let you walk out there looking like shit. Look at that.
Town center.
Oh.
So it's very important you get these lines
That I get that
right
line.
because
Okay.
you're referencing something iconic.
I was rooting for us.
This doesn't happen by chance. That works with the storyline. It's unbelievable. It's such an awful job. Why is it happening? Well, as you know, there can be many different explanations to people's stupidity and lack of creativity, but let's look at the 2 most probable ones, shall we? Number 1, they fucked up the storylines for the season and they had to re-edit everything last minute. So Elliot started as a victim, but since they rearranged everything, now they are forced to put a villain edit on him. So in this context, the mole incident that probably started as a joke during filming and was initially framed in editing as Candy and Tina bullying Elliot, now is a serious storyline. It's serious, you guys! We are supposed to be completely brain dead and buy into the stupidest thing ever conceived. Elliot is a spy, and you're watching Survivor, not RuPaul's Drag Race. Of course, this also means that they hope we didn't notice the shoddy editing in episode 2, the one that made Tina and Candy look like they were bullying Elliot. And in light of this, I have to ask you, isn't the world full of wonders? Option number 2. And this is the one that worries me the most. Everything that we saw was not an incident. The ambivalent edits and storylines were made for the precise purpose of subverting our expectations. Twists and turns. In a word, shock value. Why does this option worry me so much? Well, that's because shock value is one of those kind of things that takes the time it gets. It's really like a drug. It puts you on the edge of your seat until the next episode, but at the same time, it destroys the legacy of the show in the long run. And like a drug, you develop a tolerance for it. You become accustomed to it. It's never enough. You need bigger twists, bigger turns, to the point where everything just becomes ridiculous. And our beloved show has now transformed into a parody of itself. And if something like this is really happening, then it means this is the beginning of the end for Drag Race. Because shock value comes at the expense of the show's biggest asset, which is the story of the queens, their interactions, their talent, their motivations, and ultimately their journey. Whatever, moving on. We have this little bit of drama in the beginning, and then it basically ends up there. And then RuPaul comes in, and of course, what does RuPaul do? It tries to stir the pot. So he goes to Utica. Utica, so you voted Elliot, so blah, blah, blah. This is so transparent. It's kind of disgusting in a way, but you know, she's a producer. You gotta do what you gotta do. I also like this scene because we find out that RuPaul discovered MDMA. Even though she's 60, she just discovered MDMA. So we have these scenes in which she laughs hysterically for like 25 seconds. It is that long. I don't know what's wrong with RuPaul. I don't know why they allow her to go recording on stage in this condition. I have no idea. Because she is so high. I mean, look at her eyes. What do these eyes tell you? Call the dealer. Get me more. And also, I don't know if you noticed, she doesn't walk. She used to go around the workroom, you know, and say, oh, what are you doing? Oh, that's nice. Oh, and you, what are you doing? No, now she stays on the table. The queens come to her. Well, maybe she is too high to walk around the workroom. It could be. When they finished filming this, they probably called RuPaul's handler to get her out of the workroom. Oh God. God.
Are you a Cher fan?
I am.
Name 5 Cher songs, but don't do Believe.
I would say Gypsy.
She's not a Cher fan.
I'm
a Cher fan.
I'm a Cher fan.
No, you ain't.
Heart. Yes, I am.
But of course, before they take her away, there's always a little bit of time to shit on Tamisha Iman. Because, you know, why not? Why not? Even in stupor, RuPaul manages to be a nasty bitch. As to why, we can only speculate about that, but I have the gut feeling that maybe it has something to do with the fact that Tamisha Iman has a drag family that really loves her and care for her. Can't say the same for RuPaul, can we? Moving on, we have an acting challenge. I hate acting challenges in this show. For one simple reason, they are really easy to manipulate. You have the producers who basically wrote the scripts, if we can call them scripts. Then they also assign the groups. Need I remind you that by chance, Elliot ended up in a group with Kimora and Denali. And at some points, they might even tailor the characters to the specific queen that will be part of that group.
This is Candy Muse on paper.
Really? Really? What a coincidence. They basically have all the control. Then we have the acting part, and they can do whatever they want there. If you have to be good, they can cut out every kind of direction or feedback or suggestion that you receive. Make you look like you killed it at the first try. If they have to make you look bad, they can find excuses to say, oh, this is not right, and then show it to us repeatedly. You see, from this point of view, the producers have 100% of the control, so we cannot honestly tell who was good, who was bad, apart from extreme cases, like everybody will agree that Simone did really good and Kimora did really bad. There is no escaping that. There is just too much evidence right in front of our faces. But what about everybody else? Who knows? There's almost no way to know what was really going on during filming unless you come out with some clever ways to punch through the edit and kind of play a reverse Uno on the editors themselves. So yours truly has prepared 2 charts for you. Let's go with the first. In blue, you see the time in which we were shown the queens acting and getting directions. And in orange, the actual duration of their performance that appeared on the main stage. Now, these times are not absolute. I didn't get crazy to count every half a second, so give me about a 5% of error margin. But other than that, right out of the bat, you see that Kimora had a ton of time during acting, while Elliot had 0. We never heard Elliot utter one line. Think about that. Other than that, this chart is not really helpful because different queens at different parts, some longer than others. We have to be particularly clever so that we can combine these two information and also compare them relatively to how long each part really was, and possibly in percentage. Talking about too much time, Here comes chart number 2. Now don't be scared, please don't be scared by the title. This is easier than it looks. A positive percentage means that the queen was overexposed during the acting part of the episode. We were shown too much of them filming with Ross compared to the actual length of their part in the finished product. While a negative percentage means the exact opposite. We saw too little of them during filming. Let's go through this chart and try to understand what exactly is happening. Let's start from the left. Kimora was clearly overexposed, but that is for the simple reason that she had to go home. You had to see her fucking up every line all of the time. So, okay, Kimora is fine. But what about everybody else? I mean, with Tamisha, you can understand it, because the fact that she were overexposed kind of justified that she was not put in the top, because she needed a ton of direction and feedback in order to finally kill her performance, which she did, by the way. Why are Lala, Joey, and Utica overexposed? That's a good question, because what we see about them is absolutely nothing to gag about. They want us to see them not doing well. Now, let's move to the right. Then we have Tina, who was absolutely underexposed. Remember, Tina was not in the top this episode, and it would have been really useful to show her fucking up some lines during filming so that her safe position could be very well justified. Instead, she was underexposed. And what do you think that means? Because to me, it can only mean that she probably killed her performance, but they couldn't show it to us. Otherwise, people would question the judges' decisions even more. I think Elliot absolutely fucked it up, because we were shown zero of her filming time. And if you didn't show me, that means that you were hiding something. And by the end of the episode, Elliot was safe. And if you look back at her acting, it was absolutely nothing to gag about. It was bad. It was really bad. Olivia is debatable. Maybe Olivia fucked it up. She needed a ton of direction, she needed feedback, and when I was looking back, I realized that the line that she speaks on camera are in a different tone of voice compared to what aired on the main stage.
Misery, is that you? Misery, is that you?
She filmed her part multiple times. Does it mean that she fucked it up? I don't know. I cannot say. Kids, mescaline is a hell of a drug. Don't forget that. In the top, we have Simone, Rosè, and Candy. Now, I have no problem with Simone winning. What they shown us was really good of her. I'm not questioning the fact that she won. It's completely fine. What I'm questioning is that she was on the top with Rosè and Candy. Where the hell is Tamisha in all of this? Tamisha needed feedback. At least this is what we were shown. So that could be why she was not in the top. Then why did Simone win over Rosè and Candy? I think the only possible explanation is, well, she won because she had the best runway. Clearly. I mean, Candy looked the way she looked, and Rosè... my god, poor Rosè. I mean... I hated Rosè's look. I really didn't like it. So, the runway counts. That's why Simone won. Well, if they count, then why wasn't Tamisha in the top? Why wasn't she there instead of Candy? Why wasn't she there instead of Rosè? And then we have the bottom. Denali, Kimora, and Lala. Now, if the runway do count, then what the hell is Denali doing on the bottom? When it's convenient that the runway counts, then we count it. When it's not convenient, we are not going to count it. It's... We've seen the episode, we've taken a look at the chart, we know that Lala kinda fucked it up, Elliot probably fucked it up, and Joey probably fucked it up as well. And their runway was nothing to gag about. I can understand Kimora, but why the hell was Denali in the bottom? It could have something to do with having to lip sync against their friend, and maybe even come back next episode and be angry about it, with someone who should have probably been in the bottom in her place. Her castmate, for example, Elliot. The same Elliot who told her in the beginning of the episode that her elimination was rigged because they were friends. This is the second time already that we see the producers putting a strain on Denali's edit. Don't forget episode 1. My point is, I don't really agree with the top for this episode. I don't really agree for the bottom. I think that everything was basically done for a reason. I don't want to continue push always on the same thing. But need I remind you that Rosè was in the top again and she didn't win. Again. I hope that by episode 5, the producers realized that there is no way that they could ever trigger her and they stop doing this bullshit. And before we move on to the confessional chart and the speculations, you get used to it. You know it's coming.
Can I get Amen up in here? All right, now let the music play.
Diamond drills, high pressure on. That gold show suits you. Bump it for me, yeah. You frack it well. Okay, for those of you who are not interested and don't want possible spoilers, then thank you so much for watching. Please support the channel. You can support the channel on Patreon. You can support the channel even by giving an upvote, sharing the videos, leaving a comment. Every little bit helps. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Let's move on to the confessional chart and start making some speculations. So, negative confessionals, as usual. Tina, because Tina always has a negative confessional. Tina, I think she is the only reliable, viable villain for the season. She is outspoken. In a way, she is outrageous. In a good way, but you know, when you have the power of editing, you can make somebody outrageous look like he's being kind of offensive. If they have a lack of villains, and I think they had, Tina is starting to rise up. We will see it happen immediately next episode. So be prepared, because next episode we will finally have our villain. At least one of them. We've seen them poking a pool of queens. I believe in the effort of having some of them snap and create some nice good drama for the show. What I would consider surprising if it's Elliot that turns out to be the villain. I don't think it's good storytelling, but I would be surprised of something like that. Will it happen? I don't know. Because you know, I started this season thinking, oh, Candy is the villain. Why? Well, because if you look back at the past 4 seasons, every villain was even a queen of color, or a big girl, or even better, a big girl who is also a queen of color. This show loves to villainize people of color. So the moment you have somebody like Candy, who is a person of color, who is a big girl, and she's also outspoken, it's basically your perfect villain. The fact that they passed on the opportunity of portraying her as a villain, like we've seen in this episode, when she's basically portrayed as a sweetheart, it's really curious. So, there is still no obvious narrator. I think Joy could be the narrator for this season. I talked about it during the former speculations for last episode. Because he's always there, is continuously talking about what's happening, is still didn't have a humanizing moment. My best bet for the narrator is Joy. Also, notice that Kamora's confessionals are almost non-existent in this episode. Her humanizing confessionals, the one that were reshot where she actually had eyebrows, appeared in episode 3 and not in this episode, which kind of makes sense, because if you want to minimize the amount of editing that you have to do, then it's better to swap confessionals in an episode where she already has a lot of them, rather than re-edit this episode and readjust everything to make space for her humanizing moments. Let's talk about the top 4. Because at this point, I would say, do you remember when we said there is the queen of color not portrayed as a villain that comes from marketing because a good portion of your viewers are people of color and they need somebody to relate to. This is a marketing thing. I don't want it to sound offensive, and I have to stress this out because I received a comment saying, oh, how dare you say something like this and blah 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 and blah blah blah. No, it's not my opinion, it's a marketing thing. nothing more. As the possible top 2 token queen of color not portrayed as a villain, we had Simone and Olivia. At this point, I would absolutely discount Olivia because Simone is getting so much praise. She is winning so much. She has been complimented. She has been told that she's a star. We have confessionals that have been mismatched in order to praise her. I think that at this point there is very little doubt that that specific spot is hers. The young and talented, of course, it's Gottmik. We talked about it at length. I mean, if they are really pulling the woke card on Gottmik and make her the face of the brand and get the publicity and get all of this, they are playing the long game with Gottmik, aren't they? I mean, it's kind of time that if they really want her to be the face of the brand for this year, she has to win something because she has been kind of skating around. She had this huge personal storyline in episode 2, but then other than that, she kind of faded in the background. Who are the other 2? I would say that Utica could very well be in the top 4, like it happened with Crystal Method last season, you know? You have to have someone who is a little bit different, you know? And the 4th one, I have no idea yet. I think it could be anyone from a long season villain, like Tina, for example, or someone else between Denali, Candy, and Rosè. Seeing what they're doing with Denali, I'm starting to think that they're going to chop her for some reason. They really did too much. I mean, she's an incredible queen, but come on, put her in the bottom. This episode made absolutely no sense. Who else didn't we talk about? Tamisha. Well, you know this show doesn't like old queens. That's as simple as that. They don't like. I am surprised that they are portraying her in such a positive way. I'm honestly surprised of that. I'm happy about it, but I'm surprised because you know what they usually do to older queens on this show. They go on first, or they are used to always have this kind of story arc. Oh, I am old and I am bitter. So it's me old against you youngs. You know, they build this kind of fucked up narrative. They always did this. Let's be happy with what we have, but honestly, I don't think she has any chance of getting to the top 4. It would be incredible if it happens, but I simply don't see it happening. So, who is going home next episode? Of the queens that I talked about, I think none of them is going to go home. Especially Tamisha, because Tamisha can sew. And next episode is going to be a sewing challenge. Who has storylines that are still developing? We have Rosè, Tina, Candy, and Elliot. They have this web that absolutely interconnects them. Until those lines are developed, I don't think they're going anywhere. Who are we left with? Olivia. She is not a contender for the spot anymore. It's Simone's. But she's still portrayed in a very positive way. I kind of have a feeling that she doesn't have any story arc. She is just sweet. She is just there. And that's not really a good thing on this show. Because if you don't have an important storyline, it means that you're probably going to go home. But before that happens, we have to have a humanizing moment. Basically, whoever is going to get a humanizing moment next episode is probably going to go home. Who are the nomination for me? Based on storyline, based on development, and based on personal intuition. Well, in the pool, I would put Olivia, who else? Lala, and probably even Elliot, if he exhausts his storyline next episode. Maybe Elliot a little bit less, because there is so much going on. They worked so hard on his headed for this episode and for episode 2 that throwing away this card next episode starts to sound a little bit suspicious. If I have to nominate 2, I would say Lala and Olivia. This is my prediction for next episode. And that was our show. Fantastic. I hated this episode. I hated it with my guts. So we're going to see what happens next. Thank you so much for our patron for supporting the channel, and if you want your name up there, just tip us. Come on, you know you want it. And make it rain, baby.